Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the No Ego Podcast. Cy Wakeman, yours truly, sitting here with you, coming to you today from my home. For those of you that watch all of this on video, I am trying to move around a bit so that you get a little bit different backgrounds. Like many of you, I'm splitting my time between home and office and doing kind of odd things to entertain myself, probably. Season 3 of the No Ego episode is all about answering your questions. Initially, I had envisioned that people would email me questions with a lot of details so that we could try on very specific situations and you could watch the same principles being worked through or listen for your own podcast, being the same principles being worked through in a variety of ways. What I'm doing right now, and we were going to bring some experts in to give additional viewpoints and connection points and strategies to help you move through the world more skillfully. We're still doing that, even though we're doing it with just me solo right now and not bringing experts in. But what I'm doing instead of taking very specific situations is I'm seeing so many trends in the different questions I'm getting that I'm trying to take what trends I'm seeing and get some things out to you that are relevant for right now, quick information, sometimes unprocessed. So you'll hear me riffing maybe more than knowing for sure exactly how to do some of the things I'm talking to you about, but definitely finding ways in which I think I can almost immediately help. But it requires me stepping out of my traditional role a bit as well. Some of you have commented or noticed that I've migrated from being very business focused, and if you're a leader in this type of industry with individuals asking these questions or showing this behavior, here's a great response, right? So it's something we've culled and mined and curated out of circumstances being pretty stable, and so I can focus predominantly on the business part of it and the leadership role part of it because there's a given. The given is that people are working to manage their own mental health and bring their most evolved self to work, and leaders have developed trust, and the environments are such that you've worked on building those relationships. And what I have found as disruption after disruption after disruption is occurring, some breaking down of some certain, I put in air quotes, structures, is that people need to go back to some of the basics and some of the foundational pieces of, whoa, how do I connect in with someone well? How do I, quickly build or rebuild trust? How do we deal with difficult, more personal, more vulnerable things, big wounds that are being brought to the light of day? And that takes me into some of my past work as a counselor or as a social worker, where I'm teaching a lot more about tools to foster people's ability to share, not vent, tools for helping manage anxiety, tools for, opening up dialogue. Like what I'm being asked about and the questions are leading me to migrate to giving more personal help advice and techniques. And then it dawned on me, why do I separate out business leadership and then, now we're getting more into kind of a personal piece. And I even use so many examples of like, if you're in a relationship and you're a partner and you needed to have an outcome, like what would be helpful then? And it dawned on me that today's world is bringing us full circle. They aren't that separate. We don't need every leader to be a licensed therapist, but we need leaders to get fluent in some additional competencies to be able to walk skillfully through what's now and what's next. And then it started to dawn on me that most of the questions I'm getting have this theme where the theme is this. People ask Cy, so I have a staff meeting Monday. What is the right thing to say? What's the right way to approach it? What words do I use to handle it? What tools should I use? So how do I take kind of a messy situation? What do I apply to it to get it back in order, and then figure out next action? And then how do we measure it and how do we move forward? And a lot of my questions were just about like, how do I deal with an employee doing this? And how do I address this? And it seemed really tone deaf to these times, and it seemed out of touch with what people might need right now, the leader included. And then I started to see that it seems like there's this whole second half of the MBA. All of you graduated with the MBA. The second half of it, that was the unconventional skill set, the ego bypass stuff, not what we do, but how do we be? So if there's hard skills and soft skills or leadership, I'm talking about mushy skills, that this is opening up a place where the ego is so sophisticated, it's sneaking in order to help and really see if we can't figure out what to do and take action will alleviate some of the pain. I'm skipping over all this discomfort. So the ego is jumping in and saying, let's not just be here. That's very ambiguous and mushy and uncertain. Let's not just meditate on the question to understand it better, man. Let's jump in. Let's figure this thing out. Let's study for it. Let's cram for the test. Let's pass the test. Let's implement. Let's measure it. Let's check it off. I'm seeing a lot of leaders' stress behavior is this penchant towards hustle and action, and we just got to jump in, and if we know, then we'll know what to do. And so what's your best take on this? And people are kind of doing polls and surveying, and that's how the ego is stepping in to kind of co-opt this business, because the ego just hates uncertainty. The ego will forego accuracy over certainty. It wants certainty. So it will go after certainty even in the face of inaccuracy. And the ego is just all about, I want to know. But what I've been saying a lot in these times is don't let your knowing, like a quick, oh, I know what this is about, just like what it was in the past, no unlearning, no curiosity, no growth. Don't let your knowing interfere with your knowing. Because if we are quick, as the ego does, to jump to conclusions and name it very early and just go for it, know what it is, and then take the best of what to do and move forward, which is how today's solutions become tomorrow's problems. They're narrow, short-sighted, they come out of a lack of total understanding. My ego jumps in and it really wants that certainty. And so it drives us to know, and that keeps us from being with an issue long enough to arrive at a different knowing. So the I know mind, in a weird way, keeps us from learning anything new. And that's all ego. And the ego is stepping into, as a leader, I need to step up and take action. And I'm saying, as a leader, you need to make sure you're really countering the work of opening up space and growing the pool of shared meaning, and while not allowing venting, allowing people to speak as experts from their own expertise, of their own experience, that we can't shortchange it. And this is a typical human condition issue. Those who teach and practice process improvement or project management methodology will tell you that the reason we have the methodology is to stretch this a bit so that we can thoroughly work through some phases with some gates, so that we can get conscious of the parts and intentional. And what we find often when we're involved in project management or process improvement is people want to hurry through the discomfort, the uncomfortable parts. In the beginning of each of those methodologies are, if you're solving problems, like, whoa, time out. Let's really understand the problem. And then let's arrive at like a statement that people can agree on and get around, a statement that actually captures kind of the root of this. And then let's go on to do some analysis and planning. And we don't really get to doing till like stage 6, project management. We start with initiating and scoping and looking at alternatives, not the one you already purchased, and where everybody wants us to get to is like, so what day will we be implementing? Just if you had to guess. So there's this big energy to move towards action. I think if you apply some of our culture here in the United States and some of our virtues that many of us have learned and maybe need to unlearn, like nothing's worth it unless there's hard work involved. Like nothing, there's no free lunch. Everything needs to be hard. And if you're successful, it's because you worked hard, and just all of this penchant towards action at a very time that I think part of the reason we're into a lot of these issues that just seem so complex and so unresolvable is that the ego takes us so quick to action and being right and knowing that this strategy is better than any other strategy and here's how we should do it. That part the ego plays in it and takes it towards action keeps it filled with ego stuff like bias and judgment, and that's why it's like so complex and it's really hard. But if you're toggled up, it becomes like pretty simple to say, why don't we pay humans equitably? Like when you get to it, but when you have the ego involved and there's a penchant towards what do we do, long before we have done that initial learning understanding, then that ego is going to drive us to have ego-based solutions, which are always one up, one down, are always about power structure, are not necessarily conducive for rapid cycle improvement because the situation leads to a lot of polarity because we implement something and then we have to dismantle it and implement something else that's right. And then that was wrong. We dismantle it, we implement something else that's right. It is ignoring in rotation. It is primitive thinking. It is locked into things like, well, do you want to be socialist or capitalist? It's like, well, I think there's like thousands of options in between. When we can use good mental processes and project management methodology, problem-solving methodology, all of those good processes, mental processes, help us give time and attention and intentionality and consciousness to what is in front of us. And instead of us having to come in knowing and leave knowing, we do a lot more of allowing things to unfold. If we can do that well, then the decisions in kind of an odd way kind of make themselves because they get more obvious. When people are coming together in higher levels of consciousness toggled up, they're able to get a big pool of shared meaning and able to agree on some pretty core components that then leads to strategizing much easier. So step out, leaders, of your need to fix this, step out of your need to know, step out of all of this. I'm going to hopefully help you flex or grow some muscles in some different areas of your leadership, kind of the mushy stuff, not just the soft skills, the mushy skills. But I would tell you, I experienced this urge that leads to my own blocking when I'm working to write. So a lot of you know that I'm in the process of writing the 4th book. This one, weirdly enough, has a lot more to do with personal habits and self-help, and from a more personal side, what are some of the mushy things that could help? So this is all fitting together. And I do find times where even I run out of words. Like I sit down at the computer, even though I'm very verbal, I sit down at the computer and I go to write and I just get blocked. And my teachers have taught me inevitably what leads to that block is I'm trying to do all this at once. I'm not using a methodology. I'm trying to both write and edit at the same time. These are two separate functions. So when you have writer's block, or when I have writer's block, I'm sitting there, but I think of a sentence, and then the editor in my head comes in, and it's like, oh, wait, you don't really want to start there because you want to build it like this. And I come back and I think of something else, and I go to write it, and then the editor comes in and says, well, maybe the other idea was a really great idea. Why don't you go back to that one? And I never get anything down on paper. So while some of you are moving to action, what should I do? A number of you are talking to me about inaction. You're like, I'm frozen. I'm blocked. I'm like, I want to do this, but then I think it won't be perfect. And if I put that post up, there's people going to have feedback, and I don't know what the exact perfect thing to say is, or how to pass this test, or, like, can I just name myself an ally, or do I have to earn being an ally, or can I just act like an ally and hopefully somebody will notice? Or, I don't even need them to know that. And people are just doing this whole thing, but never taking action. So there's the end of some of you jumping right into action, ego. And there's also the piece of some of you not jumping into action, and hello, ego, because even if the relationship when I write is between me and my computer, I'm just asking myself to tell my secret to my computer. Nobody sees it yet. I don't have to trust anybody. I can't even do that because I'm, editing as I go. And so what I've been taught is write a super first draft that's a super crappy first draft. What I've been taught is like to just write a super crappy first draft and then go back with a different intention and really go through and do that editing. And I really feel a lot of times when I'm blocked in life, it's because I'm consolidated too much as the ego's way to convince me it's too complex, I'm the victim, and there's nothing I can do. I need to spread things back out. Like, I need to just really focus more on, for right now, what is being asked for, what am I being asked to give, and that which is missing is what I need to bring to the table. And that's what today's topic is really about. I want to talk to you, and like I said, it's like a graduate course in reality-based leadership. So I'm going to go there with you to just talk about some of the things I think we need to get really good at. And that topic is called holding space. If you're a counselor or a therapist, we actually study stuff like this. We get graded on stuff like this, but it's a lot of things that I learned as a counselor. I think I don't realize I'm able to do. And so I haven't yet been good at teaching all of you. So this is my way to come clean with this. And so many people just aren't practiced in the skill of holding space. They don't even know it's a thing. They don't even know what it is. When you're not good at holding space, you're, as I've already talked about, like you're quick to know, you're quick to action, you have the short answer. And having the short answer then has you move through the world less than skillfully, but because you think you have the answer, you don't realize that blind side that you have on how other groups are experiencing that particular piece through. But holding space is definitely about going beyond the ego, and it is going beyond like your preferences, your biases, your own wounds and trauma. It is the ultimate act of servant leadership, because not one part of holding space is about you. And most of us aren't good at doing things that aren't about us, right? We like to have win-win. I'll help you, but it helps me. This is not about what it does for you, and it's not about fixing it, and it's not about even having motive that at the end of holding space, we'll be any place different than we are. I have no idea where we'll be. I have to have a total willingness to go there and be okay there and be willing to start our next point of the journey from there. There's a lot of allowing and letting go, which many of us in ego get to thinking that's soft, that's vulnerable, that is passive. But allowing is some of the most intense work you'll ever do, is to be in a place and your role is holding space and just to like allow what to happen. So I think we have to start with like, what is holding space? And then I'll talk about why I even know about holding space. We're actually trained in this. It's a big core of how to be an effective counselor, and how I think leaders can start to learn from those of us that have had some training in it to hold space in moments that are right now. We've got race discussions activated, amplified, so much horrific trauma leading to some great conversations and action. Like, let's keep the momentum going. We've got people having threats to their economic position, their health. Like, we're in a world health crisis. As I put this out there, numbers aren't going down in the U.S., they're going up. So we've got some stuff going on. And so I want to teach you kind of this side of it, but I think we need to know really what holding space is. So I actually went back to some of my old textbooks and I pulled out some words. So if you see me looking down, when I'm bringing you new topics, I like to give you some good information, and I can't always keep it totally in my head because I haven't presented it before. But in theory, it's super simple. Holding space is like being present without judgment. Like, you are just able to be fully with someone without motive, without needing to get someplace in the conversation, without judgment. That's like the simplest part. But basically, you are witnessing, allowing, which is a whole different set of skills we'll talk about in a minute, and validating, which isn't like agreeing. So if you're listening to validate, you're really using a lot of empathy. I'm putting myself in somebody else's shoes. I don't have to have experienced that, but I can have some empathy for it. When you're listening to agree, it's like, well, I got to find where you are screwed up in this logic or where you missed a detail. It's listening with intensity to correct and with defensiveness so that I don't agree to something that I don't agree to. Whereas this is more just about being fully present in the room or in the space and witnessing and validating for folks. So basically, to do this, you have got to check your ego at the door. This stuff is not about you. And it's going to be fun to talk to you about holding space. So what do I mean by that in the leadership realm? When people are coming to me, as I said, for like these action items, like, I want to be able to have a discussion on race relations and racial justice and inequities. And like, so like, how do I do that? My mind goes, bam, like, well, isn't that the question of the day? Like Wakeman on her, sideline is able to just tell you, well, here's what that discussion, a perfect discussion, looks like. And I started to feel my own ego get hooked, like, oh my gosh, I should come out with a top 10, here's the best way to handle it version. And I found out I was just getting hooked right into your all ego. Like, let's figure out a way to clean this messy thing up, and let's have something to apply to it, to like fix it to. And instead I said, wait a minute. It's not about the knowing what to do. That needs to be a large crowdsource. What if I could teach people the competencies to be able to provide fertile grounds to the becoming of those ideas, to the allowing of the discussions? And so it wasn't like, here's what to do. It was more like, how can you hold space for this thing to happen? And that's not a usual place for leaders to go. Like, how can I just, help us all like just meditate together on that particular, can we just be with the question? That type of stuff is now so important. It's more important than ever. So how do you hold space? How do you be, as a leader, holding space? There's a couple of components. So one component that becomes your role, you don't need to have an agenda or move towards dialogue that ends in action. Suspend that. You don't even need to plan some of this stuff. Now, you may want to plan some stuff, But what I want you to be able to do is to move into the ability to hold space when it's required, just organically. When someone isn't just venting an opinion about a business process, but is sharing an experience they had that they finally got the courage to talk about. Very different things. So you can't apply the solution of one set to the other. So I'm going to go through some key components of what holding space looks like, because a lot of times that's the only role of a leader, is to just hold space for the team to make happen whatever's going to happen. Hold space, not that by 7:00 tonight we'll have it figured out, but hold space so that as imagination wants to be manifested, like we're holding space for that thing to happen. So if I'm a leader and I want to hold space, you're basically needing to tend to safety. Now, psychological safety isn't something you can create for another, okay? I believe that all of us have some work to do on our own psychological safety so that it's portable, so that we can walk through the world more freely. This isn't about an individual's lack of responsibility for their own mental health. We now have large populations that are triggered, traumatized, more in touch with, defenses down about really big stuff. So safety is key. I don't need you to feel as a leader like you have to control what everybody says or how people treat each other. You don't. You just need to, at the top of your mind, make sure that it is safe to be vulnerable, and that you really help people understand what their role is by your role modeling, but what you're also saying. So the first thing is to know that you move into the role of guardian. So you can't be an individual contributor. You can't be trying to solve the solution. You can't be a working manager when it's time to hold space, right? You become an invisible entity, but you become this like sheepdog, this guardian that helps people stay within some good guidelines, that helps manage the energy of the group, that helps to come in to deflect someone's triggers being pointed to a vulnerable person, right? And takes that away, but also doesn't try and change anybody in the act of it. Like, you have to be really good at being okay with what is like in the moment. So one, know that when people are activated, it is time to really pay attention to safety. And like, if you're out in the hallway and somebody is like, talking about being frustrated with another, that's not the place to have the conversation. It's also not the place to, really call people out for, telling their side of something. I guess what I'm saying, and some of this is hard to put words to, it's great if you can be role modeled it. We'll do some inner circle work. We're coming out with a course called the Inner Circle, and we'll help you with this. But just know that your job is not contribution, but safety. And in order to do this, you have to suspend your own self-importance. None of this is about you. You now disappear basically as a data point in this discussion, meeting, one-on-one. I'm trying to give you ways to know how to hold space wherever the need comes up. So it is so important that you check your ego at the door, and you know that this is about serving other people and about being there for them and their needs, no matter what feelings come up for you, no matter what your opinions are. This is the extreme to when I say leaders lose the right to their opinions. I say that because your role is to hold space and not be switching back and forth. But this is in a big way where you're just going to be present for the needs of others. You are just going to create space where people can share the thing they're the most expert on, and that is their experience. That you are going to just be the caretaker of other people, and that you need to not jump in. You need to be really careful about the weird ways you make this about you. So one weird way that people make things about them is you're telling a very emotional story. And it's like, okay, so I don't know, it's like 2:00 or 3:00. I just gotten off of work and this happened. This guy just pulled out and then he stopped my car and I was just like super scared. And somebody says, well, wait a minute. I saw you at 2:00. Don't you think it was closer to 3? This isn't about your understanding of the logical details of my story. This is about you being present to my story. And so those times when you've tried to share something and people interrupt you because they get real logical and they're like, well, back up. Were you talking about Doug or John? And you're like, it doesn't matter. It was a guy. Okay, I don't know what his name was. And then you go on. You know that you eventually just give up and you stop sharing something very important to you, that all you needed was to be heard in this. So people need to suspend their self-importance. It's not about you. It's not about your understanding. It's not about your agreeing with it. It's not about anything except for, without things going into venting and in other people's lanes or doing harm, it is about people just putting their experience out. And I've preached so much about don't let people have their personal preference trump potential. So don't let them slide their ego in and try and stop the action because they want it to be catered to them versus the good for the business. And I've said, basically move away from opinions, focus the energy on how we could and expertise. That would be the exact opposite of what you should do in this situation. You should not be trying to interpret everything as opinions, because it's not a business process we're talking about. It's racism, or it's health inequities, or it's like it's bigger issues, and they are coming up at work and at home. So get really good at witnessing. Now, witnessing is a little bit different than suspending your self-importance, because witnessing is, after you suspend your self-importance, you take up a very important role. So many of you know that witnessing, the observer, is a known effect in science. So the observer can affect the experiment simply by the act of observation, but there's an even more powerful role. So when there is a wave of particles, like something that turns something into a specific particle, is the act of your observation. So everything that's being, flowing through the air and transmitted, until I observe and see it, it takes the larger down to the local. Like, it is a big act. It is a birthing of something. It is the power to collapse like a wave into a particle. It's like taking non-local phenomena and being able to bring it local without ever saying a word. And it's not passive, it is very active. And so it is almost like, how can we shine a light on what needs to be talked about, as it's talked about, as it's messy, as we grow, as we unlearn, as we screw this thing up. It is the ultimate in getting comfortable with the mess. And if you're going to be in the mess, okay, this is you over here internally are evolving, so you're growing and unlearning. And where you meet the world with all your not yet evolved stuff, and the world with all of its complexity, that mess, it is the ability to do simultaneous things. I'm going to be growing and learning and unlearning. I'm going to be walking in the mess and showing all my unlearned places. And I'm going to be trying to be impacted by what people are trying to give me as input so I can do more learning. Messy place. That fringe is where we need to hold space in. It's where people are bringing their unevolved self to a place where they're meeting people who have been affected by their lack of evolution. And in that place, you are not judge and jury. You are holder of the space. But holding the space has a lot to do with telling the under-evolved or the not your experience to be quiet and raising up the volume of those with the experience. And doing this in a way that you're just okay with trusting the process and you're okay with the messiness. So know your job is safety, protecting the vulnerable. Know that you need to really get conscious that this isn't about you. And you have to be very active in an act called witnessing. And in that act of witnessing, it's active because you need to pay deep attention with deep listening to what is without the commentary. Well, that doesn't exactly describe it. You're thinking, she should have edited this in. She forgot that part. It's not you judging this. It's being fully present and dismissing that ego that comes up to negate the experience and is just saying, I'm going to take this at face value. I'm going to take this with no judgment and a ton of compassion. I am going to just deep listen beyond my judgments, beyond my defenses, beyond any of that. I'm just going to deep listen and be present for, and this is whether you're the leader, okay, because you also have the safety part, or this is something we have to develop in all of our people to really just come forward and say, you know what, we need to be able to do this. We need to be able to hold space for people. We don't need to know what the answer is or what the protocol is, or it's not that type of situation. So the deep listening comes with a goal that you're listening to understand, not to decide whether you agree with something. And it's also listening past your own defenses, because there's so much information in those defenses, so pay attention to them, but listening past that. So I'll just give you a real example. I'm involved in a conversation, and the term, these white women who voted for Trump, not to get political, but that was the term coming up. And I wanted to stand up and go, well, first of all, on behalf of white women, not all of us voted for Trump. And it wasn't even the point. It was just my defense that my ego wanted people to know that I'm, I would be pleasing to them. They would like me because we agreed in our opinions more than other people might agree with them. But when I got neutral, it's just not about me making sure while they're talking that they aren't stepping on my fragile little feelings. Like, that's the burden we put on people who are trying to just share their experience. We put other burdens on them, like, well, can you just stop for a minute and explain to the rest of the group why that? It's not their job. It is our job to go Google it for yourself and learn and unlearn, teach yourself. This is a time where we just really want to take burdens off of folks, make things safe, and really keep our contamination out of it. So listen, give people permission to share if they want to. Be cognizant that my skin color doesn't determine whether I want to share or not right now. For some people, sharing can be really traumatizing. Just because I had COVID myself, I didn't. I'm just using the example because I had COVID myself, doesn't make me now want to, at my most exhausted point, go through the energy of telling you what that was like because you haven't read the thousands of accounts that are published on Google. This really involves not just getting rid of the quick judgment in your mind, but really noticing how much of the time your ego slides in to get its needs met. So then, more work to be done. Practice acceptance. You have to really practice acceptance. Notice what comes up for you and just accept people as they are. Accept reality as it is. This isn't passive. Accepting isn't condoning, and it isn't relieving yourself from action or amends or restitution or fixing. It is just the practice in accepting, because until you can accept, which is non-judgment, you can't really find any compassion. You're not really yet joining the human race, because you're still like, well, if I deem this worthy enough, and if I agree with the logic behind, and if I would have felt the same way if I had been in that situation, then yeah, I think they deserve some compassion. That's not your place. Your place is just fully to accept what is. This is their experience. This is what they took away. Now, everybody's gonna say, well, what's the counter to like venting? If you've ever heard somebody share, there's a big difference. And one of the ways in times where you're trying to keep safety, to move people from when they go into venting, is I say, I was really tuned into hearing what it was like for you. So can you move back there? Like what was your first like feeling or thought? Because what will happen is people will step out of their own feelings to talk about other people's faults or other people's assumptions, and they'll move into a lot of storytelling rather than telling their story, right? And I heard this a lot when I worked with patients, families in healthcare, if there had been a less than desirable outcome. When I would first work with the patients, they would get down into some feelings because I would come in pretty open, and they would be like, I just horrified that I didn't get back here in time for when my mom passed. Vulnerable, sharing their story. You know, I had a whole thing written about this. Moves into the frickin' nurse didn't call me and I am ticked and here's my grievance. Grievances so many times are just covers for our vulnerability. So as we have the ability to hold space, this isn't something you have to like schedule a meeting and do. Notice when holding space would be helpful when somebody just wants to share, and then get busy doing that. Do it with a lot of compassion and non-judgmentalism, because when you make a judgment, you now make them responsible for now helping you out. See how you snuck in there? It's not about you. You make them responsible for helping justify why they felt that way. And your worry is this is going to go on forever. But if you actually hold space for somebody, it just doesn't go on very long at times. They just are really wanted to be heard. Done. Make sure you have high regard, benefit of the doubt for people. It's another step in this whole holding space piece that's so important for others. And in order to be able to do some of these things, here's where your real prep work comes in. You have got to be able to sit with what is. Just sit with it. Come, sit, and stay. And if you haven't practiced the ability to come and just sit with yourself, the situation, and just feel the feelings without trying to jump in to fix it, a situation where your team member comes in and you can listen and then just hold space for self-reflection. If you haven't the ability to do that, there's no way you're going to be able to do this going forward. And that's where we're growing a lot of pseudo leaders. We have leaders who have some of the hard and soft skills, but they haven't done the deep work of evolution themselves, and they are quickly getting unfit to lead. And so if you want to be ready for what's next, leaders, come with us on this next chapter of reality-based leadership, because we have got to get you great at like the ability to sit with uncomfortable things. We've got to get you skilled up in just checking your own breathing. Just make sure you're breathing deeply and notice when you're holding your breath or leaning in or things get intense. And it's not just that I'm out here promoting meditation, because it isn't just meditation. Yes, that can prepare you for being able to sit with what is and be comfortable with that. I'm trying to get you to have meditative moments where you're able to be with a question we don't know the answer to. You're able to be with a complex situation that we're not done understanding yet. You have the ability to be with this unfinished, messy, slowly coming into vision, lots of secrets revealed, truths being pointed out as not necessarily the truth, like the ability to sit right there without the ego taking it personal. Oh my gosh, I'm such a poor leader. I should have known. I should have done something. To the unaccountable. Oh my gosh, I'm just really surprised by all this. I had no idea. I just, I guess I haven't been in tune for the last couple hundred years. Like, how do you pull back into the ability to just be that good witness, that observer, and the ability to not fix it? And leaders, the difference between leading and managing: leaders hold space, leaders manage energy. Managers are the ones that were the good individual contributors that got promoted, and so they're fixers. People come to you, leaders, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go fix it. And what you do is reinforce their victim mindset, because you teach them to bring everything to you to fix that's out of the normal. You don't tap into the people closest to the work who have the experience to say, what would great look like if you were great? What ideas do you have? And you reinforce that you're the smartest person in the room, which kills our resiliency, because resiliency is based on a big data search, a big crowdsource, not just thinking this might be a little like what you knew before and now you can apply it. Not just are some things crumbling in the world for the better, I believe, but leadership models are crumbling, and I'm pretty excited about it. One of the last things you need to make sure that you can do is validate. And you've got to listen to accept rather than listen to agree with or listen to fix, because your only role in that is thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I have an entirely different perspective, and most of what you validate isn't speaking words back to them about how you made sense of it. It will always fall short. It is being profoundly grateful that you just got your mind blown because you were certain life was one way and this information doesn't fit in with what you thought to be true. Validation is, oh my goodness, you've really interrupted my thinking. I'm trying to emphasize. I will sit with that. I think everybody else, there is no need to respond about whether you're right or wrong, whether you bring up good points, whether I agree with you, whether we'll now that justifies our moving action or to action, whether you're justified feeling that way. Leaders, it takes you out of the role of like the final decision point or the filter or the judge and jury. It puts you in a role that just is facilitating thinking, consideration, minds being blown. When we talk about business readiness, the way I can get you to make sure your teams are ready for what's next is that you're increasing awareness, but you're not doing it actively by teaching, you're facilitating it. It is time for leaders to get into new roles about facilitating and allowing and fostering and connecting and, leading radical simplification and making space for people to question everything. We really need this other side of our leadership toolkit, I guess, our competencies built up. So I want to wrap this up in a more concise way for you. So in today's world, there are many issues that are right in front of us that are not able to be kept out of work because they're happening at work, right? So they're work related, they're history related, they're current times related. There's all this stuff in front of us as a leader. And as Marshall says, what got you here won't get you there. And the more uncomfortable it is, the more mind-blowing it is, the more out of the traditional agreed upon story it is. Switch from gotta know, gotta do, gotta quickly address, gotta move into action. Yes, as an individual, move into action, but as a facilitator, switch from all of that to gotta get intentional, gotta get conscious, gotta get things visible, got to blow people's minds, increase people's awareness without telling, got to pass the microphone, got to include more experiences. So move away from I got to know to there's a whole lot I don't know, and how can I facilitate? And if somebody's especially charged up, or if it's an issue that needs some full-on attention, just know that a great response before fixing it or correcting it or judging it, a great response is to hold space so that early on in this process, we can just be with it so that we can more fully be immersed in it and process it and make sense of it in a way that isn't just trying to confirm our ego's bias, but make sense of it in a way that we're going to unlearn and take this whole puzzle apart and see how it fits together. Maybe there's something we're not fully aware of. Spoiler alert, yes, that's true. So in these moments, notice when your old ways moving forward aren't going to do the trick, and they're going to lead to more problems than solutions. It's time to get intentional and hold space. What is holding space? It is creating, in the moment, some safety for us to consider without judgment, only compassion, without any needs putting forward another person's experience and allowing that experience to be shared and not having to fix it while we go, not having to get clearer understanding. None of those are the goals. This is just to hold space for us to be immersed in something with the acts we need to be doing, all of us involved, considering, unlearning, trying it on for size, meditating with that very with that new data set. That's what we need to be doing right now. And it's really important, if you want to gain the trust of vulnerable people, okay, then you need to get vulnerable. Like, you can't just gain the trust by being a perfect human being, because if someone's trust is based on you not screwing it up and you're human, there's no way you'll ever build trust. How you build trust in today's world with vulnerable people is you get vulnerable. So the building trust is, as I try and have some of these relevant discussions, I can't come to you and say, you can trust me, I'm really good at this, because I'm not. But I can say, my hope is my vulnerability when you point out something I need to also consider. If I can do that piece, that almost by definition makes me trustworthy. You can't trust me to be perfect, but if you can trust me to be vulnerable, you can trust I'm open to data points, that I'm open to pivoting my position, I'm open to many things being true at once. That's a really important piece. So I want you calling people to greatness. I really do. I want you to not enable just a ton of venting about a process that we could pick 100 ways forward. We picked one, sign up, and let's move this through. Because if you're dealing with that, those really are tried, true, and true techniques. What I also want you to remember is in emotional times, tend to the person first. And this isn't the place to persuade or convince anybody. This is just the time to pause, allow additional experiences to be known about, to open up consideration, to just keep thinking. My mom had such a great line when the answer wasn't obvious and I as a kid was kind of pressing for an answer, or how are we going to do this, and I really want to know, and I was pressing for certainty. She would often come back to me and she'd say, you know what, we've got a little time, let's keep thinking. Didn't mean we weren't going to take action, but it was her way of saying, we're getting really narrow right now and we're trying to solve this thing and there's so many things we don't know yet, we have to wait for information, let's keep thinking. When I was pregnant with my third baby, I'd named my first George, my second Charles, and now my mom said, what are you going to name this one? And I'm like, Henry Albert. And she was hoping for a less kind of, probably at the time, older name, less British, I suppose. And instead of disagreeing with me and putting her judgment in, because it's my baby, she's holding space for her daughter to have a beautiful experience as a mother. My mom wasn't very controlling. Her way of holding space is she goes, oh my gosh, well, you've got a couple months left. Let's keep thinking. And I laugh at that because that was a minimal way. She did not want him to be named Henry, but after she met him, Henry, if you're listening, she adores you in the name. You fit it perfectly. But I really want us to right now move out of feeling responsible for fixing it and for knowing. And by the way, I think that will help you leaders who are really burning out. You're like, you're struggling. When I was a counselor and I would start to feel some of those burnouts, I would know that I'm not holding the proper role in the room with my client, because when I would get like stressed, I'd be like, oh my gosh, how is she going to work that out with her husband? And that's like, it's not even my life. Whether she wants to work it out is her business. How she's going to do it is her business. Whether she does it is her, like, it's just so all her business. Back to my role, let's create safe space where you can, without editing your thoughts, dream about what life might be like in a different situation and give you some tools of what you could do to improve your current situation. Like, that's my only job. So if you're feeling exhausted, my hunch is you're way out into the future. You're way out into having to solve the world for everybody. These folks are so capable and so amazing and so smart. The solution is already there. It exists in our imagination. Imagination, of course, is manifested when it gets a partner that can bring imagination into execution. Play your part as that good midwife, and more will come, but I really want you to practice holding space. And it can look like just stay present and curious 1 minute longer. It can look like pulling a mulligan and going back and saying, you know what, I jumped in to fix that. That was premature. I want to hear more about what that was like for you, or what did you want me walking away with that experience, and doing some deep listening. And here's my assignment. There are certain questions, there are certain moments that are so filled with information for you personally to evolve. And I'm finding the ego just hates us getting still. The ego does not want us to be meditative, self-reflective, which is the ultimate death of the ego, on some key things. And so we jump into just knowing, or we jump into busyness, or we jump into I don't have time. If a truth is being revealed to you, so if there's something you thought that was true, you find out is a lie, and that disturbs you, go there. What about that truth being dispelled is so disturbing to you? That's the question I want you to ponder with, and to along the way, not just meditate in the morning and at night so that you have some practice in that you can recall in the moment, but to get more meditative with the pondering of questions and the staying curious and the avoiding advice. And all of those things we do, they're so self-serving, is because I want to feel better. I want to have a plan. I want to have certainty. I don't want to think I was part of this. I don't want to be part of the issue. Just tell me what to do and I will do it. Folks, we don't get out of it that easy. You cannot intellectualize your way through this. You need to be with this process so that you can be changed by this process. The reason we present people with data and behavior change doesn't happen is we're shortcutting this holding of space for us to simply be with this new reality we've just become aware of. And from that place, what can I do next that will help is so obvious. And if it's not obvious, you just ask the person, don't fix it, don't jump into action, just say, what could I do to support you right now? Or what could I do to be more supportive? And just consider what they say. And this, my friends, is all about contemplation and beginner's mindset. Notice this week something that you realized that you thought was true isn't, and go deep into what disturbs you about that and see how you can move past it. Thank you for listening in on my riff of holding space. Please, in the comments, add your own ideas about that. I want us to all start thinking about what would be the new competencies we need people skilled in. And I would tell you, my hope is that leaders will be rated on abilities like this to hold space. As a therapist, when we were being preceptor, when people were observing us, they noted when you got activated or you started advice giving or you interrupted the person to get inconsequential facts or you weren't very accepting of what they put forward. Those were our ratings for our effectiveness. I'm hoping that as human beings, we come up with a scorecard and that one of the ratings is how do we do today with when needed, holding space for what is, letting it come to the light of day, letting it add to all the things we're considering right now, and not having to know what to do, not having to agree with it, just to be willing to be in the space with it. Good luck. Let me know how it goes. Have a great week.